Welcome to another video and welcome to another additive synth video. It's been a little bit of time since I posted the last one and I was just getting ready, tidying up the code, about to post it to GitHub because people wanted to see it, and I had a thought, and what it turned out was I was thinking that the Arduino code was a little bit more optimized than it was. I mean, many years ago, when I was doing some other coding, I used to write sine routines and they had to run very fast, and so I used fixed point and I used shift registers and things, and it was very, very quick and condensed, so I only used a handful of bytes to do sine, and I thought, okay, surely that's what they're going to be doing. No, a single sine routine took 1.5K of my 6K, so I didn't expect that. I should have really tested it, and I didn't need it. I could have just pre-populated the sine array anyway, because I use a sine to look up for speed. So I took that out, and all of a sudden I had heaps of space left. So I decided to do all the things I originally wanted to do but didn't have enough space, and undo some of the nasty little hacky tricks to try and cut down on the space. So what we've got now, very similar to previous, but I've changed things ever so slightly. So now, when you touch a function button, you don't have to long press it to get the potentiometer. It'll use either. If you press a value, it immediately closes that function. It says I've finished. If you change the potentiometer, you have to tell it when you're finished by pressing the button again, or going to another setting. So we have exactly the same oscillator buttons and value buttons. We have attack, decay, but we now have long press is sustain, release, so proper ADSR. We have our envelope, same as last time, but now when you press long, we now have a full-blown LFO. So the LFO doesn't take up one of your oscillators. The LFO is in addition to the 6 oscillators. It has a square, triangle, sawtooth up and sawtooth down waveforms. It can be used to change the pitch. It can be used to repeat notes, so having a repeating note, which can also have a duty cycle. We can also have sample and hold. Sample and hold can change the pitch. It can also change the speed of the LFO. Now, those two sample and holds don't use the same random number. They're not sampled at the same time, so they're independent. So you can actually do a Krell patch and have both the speed and the pitch independent. And then you can tune. So if you long press the volume, you can tune, and that's useful when you are using MIDI keyboards, because it's not perfectly in tune. And you can also quantize, and at the moment it's out by about half a semitone over the 4 octaves, which is enough to throw it out. So you just have to tweak it to get it just perfect. We also have the special menu, so long pressing the phase, so that it is still phase, but long pressing gets the special menu that turns on the LFO pitch and sets the amount with the pot, toggle on and off the repeating note, and the reason I did a toggle and not just use the pot is you don't want to sort of just quickly want to change things and have to keep changing the pot and getting it back to normal, so you just want to turn it on and off, duty cycle. We've got sample and hold for pitch, sample and hold for the rate, and both of those are controlled by the pot. I think that's it. The only main thing is when you do a function, if you're using the pot, when you finish with it, you can cancel it with the same button again. Now let's turn it on. First of all, if I turn on the oscilloscope, it doesn't go to sleep, so I'll leave it as much as I can. It takes about 4 or 5 seconds to boot because it's listening for USB. You see a little click in the oscilloscope. That shows that we're now we have no presets at the moment. That's because I've actually wiped everything, because this is brand new, straight off the production line, so to speak. So I have no presets. So what I'm going to do is take you through creating sound with an additive synth. There are a couple of, if you watch some of my other videos, my favorite ones, I like a trumpety sound, I like a clarinety sound. There's another, well, a chime is another perfect one. Additive synths and FM synths, chimes are their bread and butter. But another one, which is really quite cool, is an organ sound, most like a Hammond organ. So we'll do those for, hopefully, I don't want this to go on like an epic, so we'll try and do it quickly. So let's get going. So we've got nice clean sine wave, but that's not what we want. So additive synths, you control all the harmonics and you control each one with an envelope independently. So for those, I mean, most people are familiar with subtractive synthesis. So you'll choose your oscillator, you'll choose a square, a saw, a combination. You might modulate it a little bit, and then you put it through a filter to shape it. And you have the filter's controlled by an envelope, and the VCA is controlled by an envelope. You can sort of think about this. I mean, at least in basic terms, additive synth, you can think about it just like a subtractive synth. And so what we'll do is we'll create the trumpet sawtooth type sound as if this was a subtractive synth. So first thing to do is create your waveform. Now you have to create the waveform. It's not just like flicking a switch. You have to choose the harmonics to create the waveform. Now hopefully if you've been watching this channel for a little while, you'll remember that a sawtooth is every harmonic, so it's both odd and even, and the harmonics go down, so whatever the number of the harmonics, so the second harmonic is half the volume, the third harmonic is third the volume, fourth a quarter, etc., etc., which is quite coincidentally lucky, not really lucky, that all of these buttons, the values are 1, a half, third, quarter, fifth, sixth. So let's create, so here's our sine. We will get, I'm sorry, I should say the default sound, so when you clear it, long press, the default sound is the sine wave, instant attack, tiny bit of a decay, release, and maximum sustain. So it's just basically, it's close enough to an on-off. Nice and simple, and that goes across all oscillators. But we're going to choose oscillator number 2, volume a half. So you can already see we're getting towards a saw-ish tooth wave. 3, 3, so there's 3 harmonics. Closer. 4, 4. 5, 5. 6, 6. Alright, now we don't have any more oscillators. If you were to keep going to infinity, or basically to a large number, it would be indistinguishable from a normal sawtooth. This is pretty good. It's like a sawtooth that's gone through the tiniest of filters. So it's not really, it's not too much off a straight sine wave, straight sawtooth. So anyway, we've got our oscillator. Anyway, let's now do the equivalent of our filter. So what does a filter do? The low pass filter, it cuts out high frequencies. Now what you'd normally do to make a trumpet sound is you'd have an ADSR or even an AR is good enough. You would have an envelope, and that envelope will open and close the filter. So as the sound progresses, the low frequencies come up first, then the higher frequencies, and then as you take your finger off, the high frequencies disappear first and the low frequencies stay longer. So let's do that. We have ADSRs for each envelope. So what we'll do, at the moment we're really only just going to be using attack and release, because decay takes you down to the sustain, our sustain set at max. So attack, decay, long press, sustain, release. So we will say oscillator 1, release. Now we don't want it to come off immediately. Actually, I'll do release first, just for fun. So we want, say, 3. So 3. The bigger the number, the longer it'll take. I'm going to also do oscillator 2, long press 3. Oscillator 3, I want to be a bit quicker. 2. So oscillator 4, 2. Now, I don't know if you can notice I'm long pressing that each time. Oscillator 5, I don't care, it can go straight away. Oscillator 6. Now let's have a look. So it'll still come on pretty much instantly, but listen to what happens when I take my finger off. Now, if you're very eagle-eyed, you can see the frequencies going down in order. And they're not just all going down at the same level, so in other words, at any time it's still a nice sawtooth. You can even see it if I try and stop it just at the right time. You can see that's no longer a sawtooth. Oops. And the longer you leave it, see there's only 2. The others have already been filtered out. Okay, that's all good. Let's do the attack. Now the attack I want a little bit slower. So instead of using 1, 2, and 3, I'm going to use 2, 3, and 4. So I'll say oscillator 1, attack 2. Oscillator, I'll do the same, I'll double them up. 2 is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 3, 5 is 4, 6 is 4. So what that means is the high frequencies take longer to come in, the low frequencies are in quicker, and then when we release, the high frequencies go away quicker, the low frequencies stay around a lot longer, which is pretty much exactly the same as filter. This is opening and closing the filter. So there's our sound for a brass instrument. Now what I'm going to do, that's all good, and it probably sounds exactly the same as if you were doing it on a normal synth. I'm just going to hit, you won't be able to see what I've just done, but I've just hit the Blue Meanies spring reverb. So let's see what this sounds like. I don't think that sounds too bad. So we're going to save that now. So I'm going to do a long press and then press that one. So long press. I've now saved it. So okay, second one. Let's do the Hammond organ type sound. Okay, I'm just checking the time, or again, I don't want to make this go on for too long. So what we're going to do, we've saved sound 1. I now want to make sound 2. So long press, and we should be back to our sine. I'll just turn the reverb down, don't need reverb now. Now Hammond organ, normally they have octaves, maybe a fifth. Most Hammond organs, I think the first 4 drawbars is the standard Hammond organ sound. I actually find oscillators 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6. Don't use 5 because it's like a third. If you do that, it sounds actually quite Hammond organ-y. Now, if you put all 6 oscillators at maximum volume, you'll actually start clipping and clamping. Now that can be a nice sound, but not in this case. So what we're going to do, we're going to set all 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6 to half volume. So we'll say oscillator 1, volume a half, 2, volume a half, 3, volume a half, 4, volume a half, 6, volume a half. So we've chosen our waveform, and I haven't shown you anything so far, but this is the waveform. Now what I'll do is the crow's running around, we'll just look at the trigger, we'll auto trigger. Oh, maybe okay. We'll do rise. I'll lift this up a bit, so yeah. Now I haven't quantized, so at the moment it's a little bit out, but I don't care for the moment. So there's our waveforms. Now I'll just double check. Looks like number 3. I'll just double check number 3. Just make sure I didn't. That's a bit better. Alright, so that sounds quite Hammond organ-y, but the one thing is that Hammond organs tend to have vibrato. That's what makes them sound like they do. So what we'll do is we'll add vibrato. Now the LFO is set to it's a couple of hertz by default, and it's set to no onset, so you can delay the onset, but we just at the moment got an LFO. We want to make sure that the LFO is set to triangle wave. So what we'll do is we'll say long press, triangle wave, number 2. So square, triangle, down saw, up saw. Okay, so now because we've touched a button, we don't have to clear it. It's by definition, if you touched a button, it's cleared. So we've got a triangle LFO. So now what we want to do is turn the pitch on for the LFO. So at the moment, no vibrato. So if we long hold the special, I don't know, it's a silly name, but that's the best I could come up with. Long hold, LFO. So you can see, and I can change. So, say about, you don't want too much vibrato. Maybe a bit. Now, that's way too slow. So we've set the depth. I can now go, so when you press long, press LFO menu, so square, triangle, down, up, sawtooth. Then we have LFO rate, LFO delayed onset. So ignore the delayed onset. We're going to go long press, LFO rate. Now, maybe that's a little bit too much vibrato, but you know what? I think that sounds all right. So there's our Hammond organ-like sound. So we're going to save that. So I'm going to long press, go to 2. Okay. So now what we can do is, let's go back to the saw. We save that. Let's go back to our bit high. That sounds a bit more chipmunky. Yeah. Now we want, let's make a clarinetty type sound, which is really a square wave with, again, a sort of a little bit of filter sweep up and down. So what we'll do is we'll clear, we'll reset. There you go. So we should be back to our sine wave. Now, hopefully, again, everyone remembers a square wave is all the odd harmonics, so 1, 3, and 5. So what we're going to do, same trick, we want to choose our waveform. So we'll say 3, volume 3, 5, volume 5. There you go, that's a rough square wave, and again, it may look, I might just turn the trigger down a bit just so that it triggers nicely. Okay. There we go, it doesn't get confused now. In fact, I can even go all the way down just for fun. So even though it's a bit wobbly and not exactly perfectly straight, it actually sounds just like a square wave, and that's no surprise really, because that's what it is. The human ear is pretty good at picking up on these frequencies. Now, it is a little bit filtered, because if you have a look, you can see how it looks like it's a little bit up and a little bit down. So it's like an ever so slightly filtered square wave. It's not brash and sort of buzzy, but that's fine, because that's what we would do anyway. Now we're going to do the same trick as we did with sawtooth for the trumpet, because I've actually found that almost all the natural sort of, at least wind instruments, tend to have a similar envelope. So if you remember, we'll say 1, we want that to be attack 2, and then we're not using 2, so 3 can be attack 3, and 5 can be attack 4. So good attack. We can do the opposite, so same as we did for the sawtooth, just with two fewer frequency, 3. So I'll say number 1. Now it's release, not decay, so hold it. We want it to go slowest. We want 3 to go faster, and we want 5 to go pretty much straight away. So now we could put vibrato and things on. I'm not going to do it for this one because I just want to get through one more, but we'll save that because we're happy with that. So long press, saved. So we've now got. Now we can quantize it straight off the beat of the, off the rack, whatever. So if we press long press, so we now got. So they're actually all in tune. So even though it's half a semitone out, because we quantize, we choose, that's why we can tune it, so that at the bottom and the top, you're a half a semitone. So in other words, it's still, and you can hear that there's no half notes, there's no sort of wobbling. Now, I'll show you one interesting thing. I never changed the vibrato. I let the quantize work with the vibrato. So in other words, instead of going up and down smoothly, if I was to do our Hammond organ sound, but with quantization, hear how it actually sounds like you're very, very quickly going up and down notes. I left that in because I thought it was fun. What you'd normally do is just no quantization. Alright, so we've got, here's our not a bad sound. Alright, here's the one, I suppose Hammond organ sound is very typical of additive synths, but here's one that's very typical of FM, and I suppose additive as well, but less known. That's a chime. Now you can get chimes, I mean, for example the Blue Marvin can do chimes, but you've got to be a bit tricky. You've got to use ring modulator and set frequencies and try and do the equivalent of frequency modulation to get all the harmonics, and it's actually a bit of a pain. On additive synth you control everything directly. It's actually pretty easy. So long press, long press. So we now have our sine wave. Now we're going to make this into a chime. Now all a chime is it has high frequency components as well. So think about hitting the bell. You've got the sound of the bell resonating, that's the low frequency, and then you've got a very high pitch, which is the ting of the mallet hitting the bell. So we're going to start off oscillator 6, and we're going to give it, just for interest's sake, maximum volume. So okay, the crow's going to have a bit of trouble with this. Let's try and put it on auto and see what it does. Well, yeah, there you go. I'm actually pretty impressed. So there's 2 frequencies, and it sounds a bit metallic. What we're going to do is we're going to actually turn that down a little bit. I'm going to turn it to half volume. You can see how it's the jaggedy bit's less. Now the next thing is, a bell is percussive, so it starts off, the attack's immediate. Luckily our default starts off with the attack immediate, and then it dies away. So what we're going to do is we will set, basically we'll set the sustain to 0. So 1, long press, attack, decay, sustain, release. So long press. So see how the first harmonic goes? We haven't done the second one yet. In fact, that's a good example. You can see how, because we've left the second or the 6th harmonic on, you can see it change. But we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to say 6th harmonic, go to 0. So now it would appear that the decay of the 6th harmonic is a little bit faster. So maybe we're going to have to slow that down. So attack, decay. So 6, decay. Okay. Already it's sounding reasonable. That's only with 2 frequencies. Now, one thing I will say is if you have a look, if I hold my finger down, it decays quickly. If I let go, I'm not too unhappy with that. So you can have 2 different sort of characteristics. So long and short. But the next thing is we're going to do something a bit interesting, and that is normally when you ring at least a big bell, they tend to wobble, and so the sound actually has a couple of extra harmonics. So I'm going to use an octave up, that's second harmonic. I'm going to use this as a repeating oscillator. So first of all, let's choose the volume. So let's say 2 volume, let's make it a quarter to start with. I'm going to say 2 envelope type, so that's normal ADSR delayed, which means wait till all oscillators have got past their attack phase before going into sustain, and this is repeat, so I'll make it a repeat. Now the way it repeats is it does an attack and then it goes between sustain and maximum, like to attack. So what we have to do is we have to, on oscillator 2, set the sustain to nothing. Now, you can probably hear that's way too fast because it uses attack and decay. So it basically attacks up and decays down to sustain, then attacks up and decays. So we'll say oscillator 2. So that was just a bit of shorthand. Once you press 2, you can actually just change. So you can now see the second harmonic. And that sounds a little bit more bell-like. Now again, because this is the one thing about the envelope here, it's legato. If I hold a note down and hold another note, it doesn't re-trigger the attack. So in other words, I can get lots of notes, but they still have the same envelope, so in this case they'll die away. So okay, so as opposed to anyway, so now what we can do is, again, I just whacked up the reverb, so that was the difference between holding the note. Right, we like that one, so we're going to save that one too. So long press 4. So now we've got our brass, our Hammondish organ, our clarinety sound, and our bell. Now that's all good and well. I'll just show one more feature. How are we going for time? I got about I don't want to go too much over 30 minutes because that starts to get a bit long. I'll quickly show you. Well, actually, maybe I'll leave it for another day. So we can do sample and hold and make a Krell patch and save it, because when you save, it saves the LFO, it saves all the matrix, it saves the envelope, and it saves the oscillator. So the only thing it doesn't save is the quantization, and the tuning, in fact, is even saved. So the only thing really is you can turn on and off quantization. I don't keep quantization in terms of the patches. But yeah, so hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea, and hopefully it's given you an idea of how to create sounds using additive. So when you're first getting used to it, you can actually just use all of the techniques you've got from subtractive synths and basically create sounds that are just very difficult to do in a subtractive. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I've just about hit 30 minutes, so I'll say thank you for watching. Hopefully people got something out of this. And yes, now that I've yet again refactored, I'm actually pretty happy with this now. I've used all the buttons twice, so there's no more functions I can really put in. I think maybe there's 1 or 2 empty buttons, but you know what? That's for the moment. I might leave that for other people to do. So I think this thing can now go up on GitHub. So hopefully I'll be able to do that in the next couple of days, and then people can start having a play. Alright, well thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye bye.